Hey, we are
Hey,
live. Sorry, guys, we're like 1 minute late because Pat's driving somewhere, apparently. You
yeah,
did stop driving, right? Just to be
I,
clear. I don't
I
want you to
did
get into an accident. Okay.
completely. Yeah, I'm kind of in the New Haven area, up in New England. Beautiful,
Okay.
and I'm in this weird abandoned parking lot because I'm on my way.
That,
Long
that's
story.
just
Found a spot,
everything sounds wrong about this. I don't know.
totally stable. Yeah,
Okay, but you're safe.
I'm safe,
Okay.
and and I'm super excited to be here because this is going to be a fun show. I did not want to miss this one.
I know. That's why we made sure you pulled over and but for anyone who's really wondering, yeah, Pat, you are doing some family stuff back in New York and you're swapping out your car right now.
That's about it.
for for anybody who really wants to know why Pat's in a car, or Pat might start podcasting from the car. It might be a new thing.
I know. Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. Well, it's great to be here. We have lots of people joining for Paul, of course. The yeah, karaoke, car
There,
karaoke, Pat.
I just
Maybe we should.
I can find some people walking down the street here and just we can randomly try to do some car karaoke and see how it goes.
Hey, when we bring Paul on, if we can pull this off, you get somebody in there. We can let the community choose the song. So this will go viral in no time. Um, so today I am so happy we're bringing Paul Rubenstein on. As you see him chatting, and Pat, I wanted to first mention how we met Paul, and it's important. Um, I think it's really important as we're talking about people first and culture and just the importance of great leaders. And when we sold Modern Survey in 2016 to Aon, Paul was a partner there and led assessment and leadership. And so it was, a huge role there. And um, everything about meeting Paul when we met him was he really just was the kindest, most gentle, amazing kind of mentor, helping us and inviting us into the family. Everything about the acquisition with Aon was very positive, but there are a few people that stand out, and Paul was one of those people that just always went out of his way to check in on us, and whenever we saw him was just so curious about what Modern Survey did, and was very, very positive. And I know you felt the same, and I know our third business partner Don McPherson felt the same. So I just wanted to just throw that out there. This is a good soul, a good human being, and that means a lot to me.
Well, we thought you were cool too. I just saw your note there, Paul. And what I really about Paul as we got to know him better too is, he's got such an interesting background. He's brilliant. Paul's one of these people that probably could have done anything, but ended up in HR and ended up doing consulting and put all of his talent into it. And he's just an extraordinary leader, extraordinary brain. He's a creative problem solver. So he sort of fit into the kind of people that we enjoy working with, and it's just so cool that we continue to basically get to collaborate with him in different ways as we move along our journey.
Yeah, yeah. And so, for those who don't know, Paul, so now he's moved on. He's Chief People Officer at Busier, so which we are strategically partnering with and have a lot of cool things happening. So we're just so excited to chat with Paul, and Paul brings a very unique perspective to the CHRO or Chief People Officer role. He has such a wide variety of perspective. So this is going to be fun. Some of the main focus areas we're going to chat about today is really the anatomy of analysis. So, how do we, when we're thinking about data that we're collecting, listening, how do we sort of differentiate between, what might be noise and what are actual clear signals that should drive action? And so I know Paul's going to have some really great perspective on that. We're going to dig into this concept of the people-powered enterprise, right? Frontline managers. I know Paul has a lot in thought around this. Just that this is going to be the next investment when we think about new management systems, development systems, experience programs. That really, really doubling down, tripling down on our frontline managers is going to be critical as we head into 2022. And D&I, right? We all know how important this is, so important, but we have to continue to move beyond just pledges and statements and niceties. We need those, to know where we stand, but it's ultimately how we live them and breathe them that are important. So those are the three core topic areas we're going to talk about. So we'll probably bring Paul on in a moment. So Pat, what are your thoughts on this conversation
Yeah,
before
well, I
we
mean,
dive in?
yeah, it's just this will be such a natural conversation with Paul, and really everything we're talking about. It's just, I mean, it's about increasing the kind of fidelity of because we can now because of tech, because of improved science, but improving the fidelity of how we're understanding the experience of people, and we talk about signals, it kind of fits right in there. There's, I think, about fidelity. It's this idea of kind of like hi-fi system, right? And we want to be able
Yeah.
to hear accuracy about what's happening. So it's a quality thing. It's it's a science thing. It's also asking the right questions and tying those to the right objectives and just doing all of that work so much better.
Yeah.
And in the end, we're doing this because because businesses have to do this now. It's just essential for them to understand what's happening with people, track people better, keep people from leaving. I mean, all those obvious things. But we also have so many better tools, and I think, and we just have grown up so much more around the science and the strategies and the approaches. So, what's going to be great about the conversation with Paul is we really land in that sweet spot between kind of what are the right things to do, how do we frame this the right way, and then what's the approach that we end up taking as we start to really think about deploying our strategies.
Yeah. And every week we, whether we're talking on this live show or we're talking to our clients, I mean, we do pound our fist, and this choose change, approach and framework that we've been talking about is just, there's an absolute need. If we don't change now, right? If CHROs and HR doesn't really implement significant change, there, as we said, there will be winners and there will be losers. And it's frustrating when we see organizations rushing back to business as usual. It's not only is it frustrating, it's unacceptable. And I think, and I know Paul has a very passionate perspective on this, and not only with what Visier is doing, but also how Visier helps its clients, really understand important signals to listen for, pay attention to. And I am going to ask Paul about, I love some of the social media celebration of Visier heroes, I think on a weekly basis. They're highlighting people within the organizations, whether it's new roles or people who have been there for a while. Just highlighting their people and giving them a profile and just a voice. And it's really, it's small, but it means so much. And I love that Visier is doing that. I think, more organizations need to take a lesson from that page. All right, well, Paul, if you are ready and caffeined up, I'm going to invite you to the screen. See if we can get you on. All right, Paul, we should see you in a moment. Good. Now, Pat, don't start driving.
I'm just going to pretend I'm driving.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. You working on that karaoke?
Well, thinking about it. You have to ask Paul what song he would want us to sing. Not quite sure what.
Yeah, that's right. That's the
mic check.
There's mic check. Mic check. You look great. You sound great.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I've never done a podcast with Pitchfork before. We're reviewing the top 10 albums of the year. Is this what this is?
Yes.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
And let's start there. What's your number one pick, Paul? Song or album?
I really like the Avalanche's release that came out, the most recent one. That's like when I need to get in the right headspace for work. That's been my go-to. I was joking. I didn't know we were going to talk about music.
Hey, you brought it. Wait, you that's not fair because Pat and I are musicians. You bring up music, you're gonna this conversation's good. You want to bring up film?
To see if we take
we'll go there.
Could we fill an hour? Hi guys, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Very good.
It's been a while.
Are you going to get Pepe's?
Oh, are you talking about food?
You're in New Haven. Are you going to go get pizza?
actually in Milford. I'm a little bit south, so I'm yeah.
Home of the Highlight Court. Is that still a thing? Remember
Oh
Milford
yeah.
Highlight?
I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know. I'm going to be in Connecticut for another like hour. I will. That's going to after this show. That'll be my next
I
show.
don't
Well,
even
there you
know if
go.
it
You need
still
to.
exists.
If you have
The
to
food
let us
trucks,
know.
the food trucks on 95, right where the New Haven exit is, are not to be missed. So go for it, man.
Fast. Shoot. All right.
Good. Well,
Hey,
Paul.
thank you
Oh,
for that lovely introduction, by the way.
oh, you're welcome, and heartfelt it was, because it did. When you're selling your pride and joy in a company, your people, it means a lot when there's caring leaders that wrap around it. And I tell that story a lot when I speak. Just
Thanks.
many acquisitions don't go so well. This one, from a people culture perspective, went really well, and we're very proud of that, and it had everything to do with you guys. And so now you brought that beautiful skill to Visier and leading Visier into the future. So that's awesome.
Trying.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
hard.
you're doing a good job.
It's hard. I tell you, like this chief people officer gig. I was just talking to somebody on the phone, and they're trying to figure out what to do next with their career, and they're a rock star of people analytics, quite frankly. Like there's somebody whose name you would recognize, and they're like, "Would you ever want to be chief people officer?" And they're saying, "No, that job sucks, right? What an awful job. I like this." And they didn't actually say it like that, but pretty much that was the message. And I said, I got to tell you, like I never thought, after years of consulting to the head of HR and working on HR transformation and doing M&A integration, and even later doing the deep science, I never wanted this job. I kind of like it. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It is what you make of it. And when I talk to other chief people officers, they're a lot less data obsessed than I am. But more and more, I'm finding ones who really understand that, this job is and can be like the CFO. When you are trying to figure out what a whole bunch of good decisions look like, and get a lot of individuals to make a bunch of decisions aligned to a bigger strategy, that's magic. That's how companies go from good to great. That's like corporate performance and organizational performance in a nutshell. And what I'm finding is I am suited for this, especially when you anchor in data. The ability to tell stories with data, to broadcast that data, to take talent strategy and unpack it into something that's granular and specific enough so that you can connect an individual people decision to it, as well as do things that help people just have better context, right? Whether it's about D&I, whether it's about cost, whether it's about skills, whether it's about who else can get promoted next, whatever that is. The analogy I use is, if you have a team of truck drivers, you don't tell them to drive wherever they want, right? You give them a destination, right? And you also give them traffic information and optimal routing in real time. So if you can give people, what should you, where you want to go, the North Star, and here's some real high quality, high fidelity information to make that decision around to get there, you're golden. And to me, that's sort of been the mission I've been playing with. How do you get a lot of people to make better decisions? I think that's the choose change part for me of HR, because, man, I mean, if you saw the work I did before I met you, it was so much HR transformation. We can build a more efficient HR function. We can better change this technology, make this role more clear, cut the cost of HR, outsource this, insource that. And I wrote those business cases. I got to tell you guys, a lot of what I do is to make up for the sins of the past. I wrote so many business cases about HR transformation that was about helping HR become more strategic. And all we did was lay people off, bought some new technology, outsourced some stuff. We never changed the real capability or outcome. So I guess I'm trying to The tone? My job is it a tone job? Is this Jewish guilt at its finest?
Well, that's that's I mean, honestly, I think I love what you just said. I mean, that's we forget we've gotten, and this is, I think, one of HR's, one of a flaw is we get too caught up in the transactional, the process, the transformation, and we forget about who are we supporting and who should we be empowering, and it's our people and making sure they have that opportunity. And I think I always think about it as guardrails, an understanding of a North Star guardrails, and incredible empowerment and ownership and accountability, right? And if an individual feels like that, they know where to go, they know how to work with their team, and they're empowered to make decisions. I mean, to me, that's ultimate culture at work.
I had this guy. I remember. So my first job was at Hyatt Hotels, and I remember I was bouncing around one of those, like, how do you pick what you want to specialize in? And the guy in the basement, Keith Brower, I remember him to this day, and he was great. He was like the first HR director, and he says, "Oh, come work in HR." I'm like, "No, it's in the basement." And he's like, "No, it's going to be great. The future of HR is now." And he actually had me go and do like a mainframe IT project once. It was like my first HRIS project that never actually gone. But I got a little disillusioned, and he said to like, "What's the purpose of HR?" And he said something. I don't know if I'm going to quote it right, to me that still sticks. The whole purpose of HR is to eliminate the need for HR. Mm-hmm. It says if we can get to a point where everybody makes well-considered, well-balanced decisions that address both the short-term immediate pain and the long-term, human capital needs, you're in a good place. And I never forgot that. And what I find very often is HR. Yeah, I'll never forget. I came up with a rule when I was doing some strategy work, and I called it. It was like the thermodynamics rule in. I forget which law of thermodynamics it was, but because I can't remember my physics. An HR program in motion stays in motion forever, even if you forgot why you started it in the first place. Yeah. And so much of what I observed doing HR strategy work, right, and talent strategy work, was about inertia. It's like, we've always done this, and we can't, be noisy if we stop doing something. We just need to do it more efficiently or something like that. And I saw a lot of you talk about choose change. It's actually hard. If you work in HR and your job is an HR program, why would you stop that program? You'll be out of a job. Yeah. and so I see where even to this day, HR functions, new leader comes in. What's their first thing they say they're going to do? Are they going to impact talent? No, we're going to transform HR, right? How often does that happen? All right, I'll stop talking.
No, it's great. And Paul, just one note to that. One part of, we talked last week. We were talking with Melissa and Ian Cook here, one of your colleagues, about choose change too. And one of the fundamental aspects of it is the willingness to let something go, right? And that takes incredible courage. But in order for that to happen, you need to be empowered to let something go. So I mean, what you summarized is exactly sort of the circle we get into. Yeah. I mean, so we know we want to transform and change, but if we stop these programs, does that mean we have to downsize and I lose my job, my team loses my job? And the answer should absolutely be no. Let's reimagine. Let's not start with let's cancel this and downsize. Let's sort of reshape and reimagine it. And you have to be empowered to do that. And so it takes, senior leadership to really make sure at the CHRO level to really make sure this is being examined, and so I think courage and then having a connected team is so critical. And again, on understanding that change requires letting something go.
Okay, that was the gloom part. Can I give you the hope part?
Yes. I always like the hope part.
Just so this doesn't become a Debbie Downer discussion, about woe is me, HR transformation, stuck in a loop. Man, it has never been a better time to be in HR. The appetite to understand HR as a means to an end, to impact all of those individual people decisions that are made out there, right? Not benefits costs, not all this stuff. That's, you can get an accountant to do that, right? But to really get in there and help change the outcome of business, which, by the way, when it's done right, unlocks both individual potential, not just organizational potential, right? There's a lot of good in this, intrinsic good. The opportunity for HR to get out of its own department and get in the business and help shape all those decisions and align, it's never been better. People want it.
Yeah.
People
They
want
do.
it, and it's there. So when you talk about what you're going to start, stop, continue, right? Making sure people understand what they're going to start doing and get out of your office, get out of your HR office, get into the business discussion, get in the flow of work. HR in the flow of work, good people information in the flow of work, not HR's work, the regular work of business. That's where the future is. And that's what's going to help both. Like I said, it's not just about the business. It's actually about people.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful.
I love that, Paul. And I think that's important to remember. And I think this is why we pound our fist and give HR a hard time, because we do believe that as well. And when we say HR's last chance, like, we need HR. Everything you just said is what we want, because it is an incredible time. And in fact, it's necessary for HR to operate just as you described. And so, maybe we can get into in a little bit,
Sure.
how do we do that, right? And so how do we start to really listen to our people? How do we live a people first approach, a people first mindset? And so I know the first topic is, Paul, something that you talk about. I know you did an article, white paper on this recently. It's the anatomy of analysis, and really the kind of the overarching question is, how do we leverage people analytics to tune into what your employees are really saying and filter out the noise, and so we can better understand, for example, what our top retention issues are. So give me a little bit of a lowdown on that.
Let's actually get really tactical, because a lot of people say, well, what do you do with people analytics as the head of HR, right? And so my vision for this in many ways is how the CFO uses data, right? And the CFO uses data, let me set the frame for you, right? Is what I call reflect and correct, and in the flow of work. Two motions, right? Reflect and correct, this one, boys. The P&L, the monthly P&L, it comes out. When that comes out, what do? First of all, you either like cheer or you go get some antacid. You feel like you're a hero or you feel like you're a goat, right? And we all worked for the same person. And you know what that phone call sounds like when those numbers aren't there.
Yeah.
It's not fun. But, you actually have to, and if you think about corporate performance, 12 times a year, that set of numbers comes out. How many times can you go without actually changing your behavior and still be credible or still keep your job? So I think, the first thing I want you to get in your headspace of, you can do the same thing with human capital data. So for instance, here's your turnover curve. Here's your desired workforce representation curve. Here is your cost curve. Whatever that curve is, it's no fun to go into the boardroom and say, oh, I don't know, I can't really impact that curve, and I said it was going to go this way, when all those tiny decisions are made very far from the C-suite. So how do you collapse the so that's one. The second is in the flow of work. You talked about inertia. People make inertia, bias. I was managed this way. Joe was a good employee. I'm going to hire someone just like Joe. I need to hire the person who's most likely to come in for the next shift, not maybe the person who's best staffed for what I need tomorrow, right? Managers make decisions based on inertia, past practice, and behavior, unless you get some data in front of them, or they avoid pain. Unless you get some data in front of them to remind them what the bigger picture is or what a better context is. Does it make sense? Right? So there's two sort of scenarios there, right? The how do I not go more than a month without making a bad decision or making a better decision, and how in that moment do I see something like a dashboard on the car to know how far I should pull over in my Tesla to recharge, or whatever that is, that in the flow of work decisions. So when we take something like resignation, right? We publish, we publish a lot on this. How do I get people to actually take action on the right things? Okay. And I want to leave you with one other vision in your head. Do you ever go into a call center?
I have, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know what's a really hard job? Call center manager. Imagine all those people, like coming at you, it's a tough staffing ratio, and you get a lot of employees who are asking you for things, noisy, and you tend to go towards the noisy, right?
Yeah.
But how do you actually know who's most likely to resign? How do you know who's actually most likely to underperform or overburn? How do you actually balance the quiet and the soft? How do you, in many ways, sort the signal from the noise? Right? It's an example of what as humans, we respond to the loudest noise, and we can't always detect the signal. So how do you take analytics and start to make it easier for people to focus on what's going on and take the right actions? And when we throw a lot of data at people, spreadsheets, et cetera, they can get overwhelmed. So now here I am, I'm the CHRO. I cannot meet with everybody. But if I do a cascade in the classic organizational structure, I tell this manager who tells these 2 managers who tells these 4 supervisors who tells these 20 employees, something gets distorted. It's the telephone game, right? It gets put through the lens of their interests rather than the large strategic goal. So how do I craft an analysis that goes directly from me as the CHRO to every single people manager? Another, and you'll hear one of the phrases I use is, how do you collapse the distance to impact for those people who are setting strategy and see the big picture, for those people between you and the real decisions that are made? We'll get to the middle of the organization another day. An analysis. I tell stories. I like telling stories, and I like people to be able to tell us. So first, great analysis to me in people analytics starts with the trend. People hear 2 things around trends. They hear what they hear in the company, and they hear what they hear in the media. Make no, don't be blind to the eye that whatever problem an employee hears about in the media that's happening in another company, they assume it's happening in your company, and assume it's the same root cause unless you prove otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It goes for diversity. It goes for, like, I bet you everybody, based on the Amazon story, is checking their disability calculations and their leave calculations. Okay. That's a true thing. So the first thing is, how do you contextualize a trend so people understand so they can sort, even with their own teams, what people are feeling or seeing, and give them the data. Root cause, resignation. It isn't just that everybody's resigning. It might be that there's a specific population that's resigning that's causing the whole trend. So being able to unpack a trend into its drivers, that's the first part. What does it mean to you? What is really happening? The second part that I think is important is the statement about, what if you do nothing? Like, the most powerful graph you can show someone is, if we do nothing, this is where we were headed. And for us, when I do this in our own company, I look at early career employees. I worry about them the most, driving turnover. It's natural for them to turn over, but you work in tech, sexy jobs out there. People are dangling, magical fairy dust of shares and whatnot out there. It's a great time to be in tech. It's also a great time to recruit, but we'll get to that later. So how do I help them understand the career progression and where we lose people of a certain ilk, right? So what if you do nothing? And by the way, if you get people over a certain hump, I looked at our data, they stay more than anybody else in the organization. If you just get over the speed bump, it's smooth sailing. So what if you do nothing? How important are these people? The third, data that might not be in your analytics system. Narrative data, telling stories. Words are as important as graphs and charts, and should be in the same flow so that they're told together, right? And then what do? I actually wrote steps. do a stay interview, do this, like here are the things you could do. And one of those steps was get this data into the hands of everybody you know. And then the fourth goes from, okay, who's the trend? What if we do nothing? What steps should we take? Who to focus on? Hey, literally a 2x2.
Yeah.
We look at compa ratio and we look at career progression. I have a risk of exit algorithm that we also look at too. But when I really pin it down, people are not always comfortable with using just a single number indicator. The face validity for a lot of them isn't there, but being able to, use terms that they understand and say, these people danger zone, these people talk to them, these all to drive a very simple management action of, hey man, let's get on the phone and talk about something other than tasks. Let's talk about why you want to stay, and here's who to focus on. And that's the beauty of going from a trend to a people strategy with people analytics to a person to person analytics and a person to person strategy.
Right.
I liken it to this. If you were the CFO and you knew somebody was in trouble, you would pick up the phone. But you don't always know who to pick up the phone to, and you want your managers to pick up the phone. This is a way of taking that action that you desire for every employee to experience. We talk about employee experience. You want the employees to experience a certain way. Get real clear with your managers of who they should focus on and what the employee experience should be like. By the way, that's different than employee experience technology. The most important employee experience is between the employee and the manager. And this is a way of shaping it and focusing it. Okay, that was a really long answer. I'm so sorry.
It was.
How did I get so nerdy?
Pat, I'll turn it to you for a moment, and then I have a couple questions.
And that's great, Paul. I just love the way you organize your approaches to this and the way you frame it. And when you were talking about the Tesla thing, I was thinking, because I'm at a Tesla right now and I've been driving around.
which is why I called that out.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, and I've been driving a Tesla for about 5 years. So I was, been pretty used to the kind of the new paradigm. But the reason it's such an interesting analogy is that so much of what needs to work is trust, right? So when you head out into the deep into the country or the hither, Tesla, you really have to have a strategy about how you're getting to point A to point B, right? You've got to have trust in the way that you're able to, know, I can stop here and do a supercharge, and then I can end up there and I can charge at the house when I get there. Like, you really have to think through your strategy, right? But you can't do that, or you won't do that unless you have trust in the kind of data you're getting from the car, the kind of system, so you can make those kinds of decisions. They're really sort of akin to that manager, right? And I think that's a key part to this is, how do you build that competency in managers, that they have trust in this data, and it allows them to achieve what they want to achieve. Like, I choose to drive a Tesla because I believe in the new paradigm, but that kind of is like a purpose statement, for a company, right? I believe in the things we're trying to do. So now give me the tools so I can have, a high degree of trust in the work I'm doing with my people toward that end. And it really, from a design perspective, Tesla has done such a great job. And I was just thinking about that, I'm kind of a nerd too, right? I'm looking at my dashboard right now, and I'm looking at how many watt hours per mile I burned, over the last 50 miles. And everyone's like, well, what the hell does that mean? And it's 261. That doesn't really mean anything unless you really start to get into it. But what I do care about is range. How far am I going to go till I'm bricked on the side of the road, right? That's the thing I need to know. And there's other cool things on the Tesla, like when you're going to what you think you want to accomplish, it shows you are doing better than planned or worse than planned as you go. Yep. Conditions may change. It's getting colder or raining.
You've seen my path to strategy chart where I show the up or down. Okay, exactly. Can we peel that back, right? Yeah. Because let's draw the same parallel. Ready? Remember this. Transparency, repetition, and what I'll call relatability, right? Let's talk about relatability first. HR's got like a secret language, okay? Like, you need a secret decoder ring in order to understand compa ratio and all this other shit. Like mere mortals are not born to understand the language of HR. Get over yourselves if you want people to make good people decisions, people managers make good people decisions and not have to come to you each time. Again, not have to come to you each time. Get it out there and get it in plain language, or at least educate them and help them and provide a Rosetta Stone, right? That's the first thing. And don't get so caught up in the consistency of your own language that you're not willing to change. Okay. Don't blame everyone else because they don't understand your data, right? So relatability of the data. And relatability also has to do with face validity, right? Do people understand and see the data enough, right? Do they see it in a language they can understand? And I don't just mean the terms, but the way you present the data. Present it not as a list, present it as a graph, a 2x2, whatever that is, whatever the analytics and language of your organization is, and nothing to do with tools. The second thing, so that's relatability. The frequency and repeatability is really important.
Yeah.
A lot of HR doesn't share the data because it doesn't change that often. It's boring to them. Did you ever watch a turnover graph move? It's like watching paint dry. But when it does change, you're like, oh crap, that's a really cause for urgency. But imagine you'd never shown that graph to the external world and they saw a 1% move. They're like, oh, that's just 1%. I've never really seen this data before. What do you mean? What does that happen? But when you show people something and it set a rhythm, this is what I mean about, reflect and correct. January, boring. February, boring. March, boring. April, changed. It changed. You start to set, there's an importance of it always being there, right? And setting that up, right? And that also has to do with broadcasting it to the whole organization. So transparency is another part of it. I will tell you, HR is often afraid of the ramifications of sharing data broadly. Yeah, I get it. There's personal information, there's all this other kinds of stuff. But if you want people to change the outcomes that you're measuring, you have to show them the measures. You have to treat them like adults. We err on the side of caution and get frustrated that we don't get change. Let's err on the side of transparency and see how much change we can drive. If you change nothing about the way you change data, you cannot expect, am I back to choose change?
It seems like a common theme.
So that's sort of a philosophy thing. And by the way, nowhere is that more important when it comes to diversity data. You cannot expect to get the diffuse accountability that exists around workforce representation outcomes. You cannot move the needle unless everybody sees the data. And we came from 30, 40 years of lawyers telling you, don't share that data, we'll get sued. And now, what do? I get up from the whole company. I'm like, okay, we have a gap in women right here. Let's change it. Okay, I'm paraphrasing a whole town hall, but that's how we started to get our change.
Yeah. I'd love, so first of all, for the community and just a quick statement, Paul, I think this is what happens when you bring a talented consultant, a data geek, and someone who cares about people into a chief people officer role. You get this type of thinking. No, seriously, because Paul, you put it, your consulting skills and your understanding of strategy, and even what you're trying to put behind you as your sense of building transformation strategies. Actually, the skill in being able to do that applied to a modern way of thinking is actually, I think, and I believe it's probably serving you well. So just kudos to that. A couple questions there that you brought up earlier, and I don't want to get too much into Amazon issues or even Facebook, where the big news seems to amplify from. But do you think, while we know sometimes media will sensationalize a story and amplify it to ridiculous measures, and you said right away CHROs are going to be looking at, to make sure they're not making the same mistakes. Yeah. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because if we sort of take the worst case scenario, we amplify it, again, to the point where that's headline news everywhere. But is it healthy? Because it does make everyone sort of check themselves and have conversations internally. I'm just curious to get your opinion on that, because we have a lot of clients, asking us about that too, and I'm curious to know what you think.
I don't know. Like, in many ways, it's funny. The governments issue a new regulation on how you should do something in your workforce. You spend 10 months analyzing it with a bunch of attorneys to get the CEO to say, you're right, we should change this and let's fund it, right? You've seen that motion, maybe a year. Something pops up in the media that you have to answer questions about in an employee town hall. You're on that.
It's
right?
It's immediate. It's immediate. Yep.
Like, we are all held accountable for the experiences of employees before they join our organization, like the experiences they had with their last employer, and we shape the experiences they have with their next employer, right? I wish all employers were great. I really do. Yeah, it's nice to be a better employer than another. That allows you to, attract. So there's a competitive advantage from having some crappy employers out there and some crappy employee experiences. But like, I don't know. I think this is an awakening that we have a responsibility to be really good with employee data, with employee experience, that we have to have both humility and empathy as leaders and managers, that we have to be compassionate for the concerns of employees. It took an email to Jeff Bezos to correct somebody's paycheck, right? What like, that's the failing there. That's the failing. Those systems are complicated. Leaves are complicated. All those things are complicated. The real failing is it took Amazon's facing unionization. Why do people unionize? Because they don't feel like they're being treated fairly, compassionately, or transparently, right? And they have to escalate beyond the norms. As soon as you start to think like a bureaucracy or become, and it happens overnight, not by intention. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, you did. Thank you. I mean, that's it's a complicated. We could spend a whole hour on that. Just wanted to get your first initial thoughts. I mean, I'll just add one thing. Even right now, you brought up earlier, we have to understand who's from the Great Resignation, who's leaving, what types of jobs are leaving. If we take the food industry, for example, servers. I mean, this is what's baffling to me, and especially if you think about restaurants that stayed open during the pandemic and still paid their people ridiculously low wages when they live on tips, and there weren't tips because there weren't customers. And you're wondering why servers are one of the highest category of individuals leaving and or not coming back to the workforce. We know companies now are going up $30, $40, $50 an hour to try to get people back. But the fact that it took people not being able to live, not being able to pay their mortgages, not being able to pay medical bills, you name it, it took that, it got to that level to actually choose change, is unfortunate. I don't want to be doom and gloom again, because I think we can turn this around, but so we have to learn from these mistakes. We have to learn from this last 18, going on 2 years now. 18 months to 2 years. And so that's just one example I want to bring up too. And people first should always be a mindset. And it's unfortunately it's an afterthought, and then we rush to fix the solution too often.
I was just going to interject one quick piece to that. I think
Paul might be frozen. Hang on for a sec, but keep going, Pat.
Hopefully Paul comes back. If you think of so like that conversation, the question you asked Paul earlier about, is it a good thing or a bad thing that there's this kind of media pressure for people to respond to it? Thinking like, if you don't take the time now to improve the fidelity, like we talk about, improve the process so that you do have all the things Paul talked about, authenticity and transparency. And there's a good connection between how employees at an organization or people at an organization feel connected to a company. There's that trust that's there. If you don't, there's and if you use that Amazon example, if that worker wasn't able to get through the existing channels to voice their concern, right, and then they felt as though they're not being respected and understood, it is easier and easier for people to go outside of bounds, and make noise and get attention, and that becomes a terrible problem for the company. It's either that or there's the threat of unions, et cetera. So, yeah, if you're not doing this work proactively, I think the risk just continues to go up and up for organizations to find themselves on a back foot, responding to things that they just should not be in that position to be able to do. And you're right, Dan, the changes that we've gone through culturally, over the last year and a half, are just kind of increase the pressure and the importance of doing this kind of work. So hopefully we get Paul back in. Is he floating out there, or is he?
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks like he's accepting and connecting. So we'll give him a moment. Hey, Paul, if you can hear us, maybe just throw something in the chat and let me know. But we'll continue on here. But hopefully we get you back. There's so many questions I have for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like you're. So Paul, if you don't have a connection, let me know and I'll resend it. But it looks like you're in the process of reconnecting. Fun with technology. Well, Pat, so then one of the next topics I wanted to get into, let's riff on it a bit while we're waiting for Paul to come back, was really this, what Paul will eloquently talk about in a moment, but it's the focus on the people-powered enterprise. And we've sort of been touching on this a bit, but it's really back to the basics with people management. So, implementing people processes and systems that reflect flat organizations, right? That really focus on frontline managers, empowering frontline managers more. When we think about development, when we think about management systems, when we think about employee experience systems, starting to design for a less hierarchical world and more for a flat world. And Pat, I know you have a lot of passion and interest in this topic. So, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think organizations should be thinking about?
Well, right. I mean, there's sort of two parts to it. Is that one is that people want to have more of a sense of connection, right? So the flatter you design work, right, or your organization, the more intimacy people feel, I think, with the kind of purpose in the organization. The other is the way we're doing work now, just so much more. It's much more distributed. We're working in different ways. Like how work kind of happens is just so different. So we just need to. Okay, looks like failed again. I see Paul's thing. So, well, hopefully we get it.
Let's try. Yeah, I'm going to try again here.
Yeah. So anyway, we're working differently. We need to design for the way that we're working differently, and also we want to kind of exploit this idea of connection and intimacy between a worker and an organization, wherever they are, and that sense of who that company is, right? I think that's in some ways like the flat organization may be an outcome of that. I don't think it's like you have to do flat, but it's those two ways of thinking, like how and where is work happening now, and how do you increase that sense of intimacy and connection that people have to the organization, so they don't feel like they're 8 or 9 levels deep in an organization and just feel very kind of detached from where they work and more importantly why they do the work they do.
No, completely agree. Well, hey Paul, I'm trying to. Everything looks good on our side, so I don't know if something's going on with Crowdcast. So hopefully you can accept.
Yeah, Paul.
I'm going to try one more thing.
Yeah, if you have another browser, I'm not sure which browser you're using, but if you're, Chrome tends to be the best. But if you're on a Mac, maybe you just try Safari or Firefox or something. Sometimes it makes a difference.
Yeah, let's try this one more time. Okay, accepting and connecting. There we go.
Boy, that was fun, huh?
That was fun.
Yeah.
It worked.
We had to vamp for like 5 minutes, man.
And you had made so that anymore.
Uh-oh.
Paul, it sounds like you're back with us now. You don't have a super strong connection. You're a little pixelated, so
Maybe that's I apologize. I don't know what happened. Hey,
You're breaking up, Paul, unfortunately. It looks like you just froze again.
Paul is the man.
Paul's the man. Yes. Shoot. Yeah, it must be an internet connection. Bummer. Well, this just means we're gonna have to get Paul on the show again because it's hopefully we get him back here. Let me try one more time.
Yeah.
Sorry everybody, but sometimes this happens.
Well, one of the things where I was hoping we would go with Paul while you're working on getting him in, Dan, is how do we empower managers with information so that they can, again, with that better fidelity, better information, can do better work. I mean, to get back to the Tesla example, when I'm driving down the road and I have high confidence in the data I'm seeing on my dashboard here, that I'm going to be able to, get to my next supercharger stop, but that's along the journey toward when I have to drive back to Minneapolis, right? So I know it's going to take me 24 hours to get there, but I'm going to have to make these 10 stops. And how do you build my confidence, as a driver? It's the same thing with a manager. How do you give them that kind of information so that they're able to get through those kind of leg by leg, they have trust in that information? And I know Vizier is really passionate about getting that information designed and really distributed out at the manager level, so they're getting that right information. So that they can make those good decisions. And I think that is so much of the key of it, right? Is that it's the right data, and then it's the right design and the right strategy. Those two things really need to happen hand in hand. So I see a note here. I like the topic of deskless workers and their experience with the company.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, it looks like Paul's trying to accept and connect again, so we will see if he comes on. So Pat, let's one of the things we've been talking to last week, we brought this question up, and I know you and I talk about this often, and I think it's important we start thinking about what 2022 is going to look like. So the headlines in 2021, we all know too well. And we've been talking about it a lot today, from the Great Resignation. We know people aren't feeling valued. There is mass exit. On the other hand, we do know, and I want to pick up on something Paul said, we need to be optimistic because HR is an incredibly important function. It needs to exist. It needs to transform. It needs to continue to transform, but it is so important. It takes care of its people within an organization. And so it is a great time to be in HR. There's never been a better time.
Yeah.
When we have to care more, we have to love more, and everyone knows this is our focus. But when we think about 2022, Pat, what is your prediction? Thinking about, if we put our change mindset on, what do we need to start prepping for now within organizations as we think about rolling into 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to ease my way into that, just to pick on what you said first, HR is HR strategy, HR leaders, they are going to be the key part of the solution to, one of the most challenging parts that's happening right now with business, which is unlocking and untangling this, whether it's a skills misfit or a, worker misfit or loss or or attraction and recruiting, all these really, really tough challenges that if organizations don't address, they're going to struggle to be hit their goals and do what they need to do. And so HR is part of the key on that. And if they don't step up and do the work we've been talking about, this is why we say it's HR's last chance. Someone else is going to do it. So it's going to be so critical for the business from a strategy perspective that leadership and that might be part of to kind of start to answer your question. I think this strategy is going to become so critical that the investment potential and courage is going to go up pretty dramatically for businesses to kind of unlock these people strategies are, and business leaders are going to want to do it with high quality data and information. And I mean, Paul laid it out really, really well. Like, what are the kind of key things and insights that we need along the way we do work, and whether it's a manager level or a leader level, so we can make really good decisions. And then, so in order to do that, you've got to have good quality data. And I completely agree with Paul too. There's also that sort of anecdotal information that needs to be wrapped around it too. So I kind of have a sense of kind of context, and I, as a manager, have a little bit more sense of kind of empathy and really connection with